Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the VIP section. Cyrus Ashford looked up from his glass of sparkling water at the security guard standing over him. The man's hand rested on his earpiece, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and duty. I'm sorry? Cyrus asked calmly. This area is reserved for platinum donors and their guests. The guard glanced at the simple navy suit Cyrus wore, well made but understated. No flashy watch, no designer labels visible. Your name isn't on the list. Before Cyrus could respond, a sharp voice cut through the ambient music. Is there a problem here? Margot Sinclair swept toward them in a custom Valentino gown, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She was the chairwoman of the Children's Hope Foundation Gala, the most exclusive charity event in Manhattan. $5,000 a plate, $100,000 for a VIP table. This gentleman was in the VIP section, Mrs. Sinclair, the guard explained. He's not on the list. Margot's eyes traveled over Cyrus slowly, deliberately, taking in his unassuming clothes, his lack of obvious wealth markers, his calm demeanor. Her lip curled. I see. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with condescension. Sir, I don't know how you got past the entrance, but this event is by invitation only. The VIP section is reserved for our most generous supporters, people who actually contribute to this cause. I understand, Cyrus said quietly. There must have been a mistake. The only mistake was security letting you in. Margot snapped her fingers at the guard. Please escort this man out and check his pockets. We've had issues with theft at these events before. A ripple of attention spread through the nearby VIP tables. Heads turned, whispers began. Cyrus remained completely still. You want to search me? It's standard protocol, Margot said, her voice carrying deliberately, for people who don't belong here. Several guests nearby laughed. One man in a three-piece suit raised his champagne glass in mocking salute. A young Latina server nearby, her name tag read Nina, watched the scene with visible discomfort. She clutched her tray of hors d'oeuvres, her eyes meeting Cyrus's with something like sympathy. Cyrus smiled at her, a small, genuine smile. Then he turned back to Margot Sinclair. Mrs. Sinclair, he said, his voice calm and measured. You're absolutely right. I clearly don't belong here. He reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, so the security guard wouldn't react, and pulled out his phone. I'll see myself out. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the exit with perfect composure. Not hurried, not ashamed, just calm. At the door, he paused and typed something into his phone, and then he was gone. Margot Sinclair laughed, turning to her VIP guests with a dismissive wave. That's the problem with these events. Every nobody thinks they deserve a seat at the table just because they bought a ticket. The guests laughed with her. The music continued. The champagne flowed for exactly 4 more minutes. And then the lights went out. You just watched a billionaire get publicly humiliated, accused of theft, and escorted out of a charity gala by a woman who had no idea who he was. But you don't know why, Cyrus Ashford was smiling as he left. You don't know what he typed into his phone, and you don't know why, in exactly 4 minutes, that entire event is going to come crashing down around Margot Sinclair's ears. Because here's what nobody in that room understood. The man they just threw out wasn't a gatecrasher or a thief. He was the reason that event existed at all. If you've ever been dismissed because of how you looked, if you've ever watched someone powerful mistreat people they considered beneath them, if you've ever wondered what would happen if the person they disrespected turned out to be the most powerful person in the room, then stay with me, because this story is about to show you what happens when you humiliate the wrong man, and it's going to be spectacular. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see what happens when those lights come back on. Now, let me take you back to who Cyrus Ashford really is, and why he was at that gala in the first place. Cyrus Ashford had been invisible his entire life. As a child in the Brownsville projects of Brooklyn, he was invisible to the system that should have protected him. Foster homes that forgot his birthday, schools that passed him through without teaching him, a world that looked at a black boy from the wrong neighborhood and saw nothing worth investing in. He'd made himself visible through sheer force of will, scholarships earned through perfect grades, a computer science degree from MIT paid for by working 3 jobs, a startup launched from a basement apartment that grew into Ashford Holdings, a $12 billion tech and real estate empire that now employed 30,000 people. At 40 years old, Cyrus Ashford was one of the wealthiest men in America, and almost nobody knew what he looked like. He didn't do magazine covers, didn't attend celebrity parties, didn't post on social media. He gave interviews rarely and only about his companies, never about himself. His philosophy was simple. Let the work speak. Let the impact matter. Stay invisible so the mission stays visible. That philosophy extended to his philanthropy. Over the past 15 years, Cyrus had given away over $800 million to causes he cared about. Education, housing, healthcare for underserved communities, almost all of it anonymously, including $50 million to the Children's Hope Foundation over the past 5 years. The charity ran after-school programs, funded scholarships, and provided healthcare to children in poverty across the eastern seaboard. It was exactly the kind of organization Cyrus wished had existed when he was growing up, the kind that might have made his childhood less brutal. So he'd funded it, quietly, asking nothing in return except quarterly reports showing the money was being used properly. For years, those reports had been satisfying, until 6 months ago. That's when Cyrus had noticed discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, programs that existed on paper but seemed to have no real-world presence, administrative costs that had ballooned while direct services had shrunk. He'd hired forensic accountants, private investigators, digital analysts. What they'd found made him sick. The Children's Hope Foundation, the charity he'd poured $50 million into, was a fraud. Not entirely. Some programs were real, some children were being helped, but at least 40% of all donations were being siphoned off. Embezzled, redirected into private accounts controlled by the foundation's leadership. Leadership that included Margot Sinclair, the gala's chairwoman, and her husband Richard, the foundation's chief financial officer. They'd been stealing from children for at least 8 years, and they'd been doing it under the cover of Manhattan's most prestigious charity event, a gala that existed primarily to provide them access to wealthy donors and a veneer of legitimacy. Cyrus had considered going straight to the authorities, but white-collar criminals with good lawyers often walked free. He needed more than evidence. He needed a spectacle, something that would make the truth impossible to ignore or spin. So he'd devised a plan. Tonight's gala was being held at the Crown Plaza Grand Ballroom. What nobody knew, including Margot Sinclair, was that Cyrus had quietly purchased the Crown Plaza Hotel 6 months ago through a shell company, the catering company handling tonight's event, a subsidiary of Ashford Holdings, the entertainment agency providing the music and performers, another Ashford property, the security firm, same. Even the audio-visual company running the lights and sound had been acquired by Cyrus 3 months ago. Every essential service for tonight's gala was controlled by a man Margot Sinclair had just publicly humiliated and accused of theft. Cyrus hadn't planned to reveal himself tonight. He'd come to observe, to see the corruption up close, to look into the eyes of the people who'd been stealing from children for nearly a decade. But when Margot had him searched like a criminal in front of 100 wealthy donors, when she'd laughed at him, dismissed him, treated him like garbage, something had shifted. Not anger. Cyrus had learned long ago that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. Something colder. Resolution. Margot Sinclair wanted to know who belonged at her precious gala. She was about to find out. The moment before the lights went out, Nina Torres was carrying a tray of champagne to the VIP section. She'd seen the whole confrontation with the man in the simple navy suit, had watched him be accused of theft, searched by security, and escorted out while the rich guests laughed. He'd been the only person, all night, who'd looked at her like a human being. Earlier, when he'd been sitting in the VIP section, she'd offered him champagne. He'd declined politely, said he didn't drink, but he'd asked her name, asked how long she'd been working these events, asked if she was okay because she looked tired. Nobody asked servers if they were okay. She'd told him she was fine, just working extra shifts to pay for nursing school. He'd nodded like he understood, like he actually saw her, and said, "You're going to be a great nurse, I can tell." That was it, a 30-second conversation. But it was the only moment all night she'd felt like a person instead of furniture. And then Margot Sinclair had him thrown out like trash. Nina had wanted to say something, to speak up. But she couldn't afford to lose this job. The catering company would blacklist her from every high-end event in Manhattan, so she'd stayed silent, like always. Now, standing in the middle of the ballroom with her tray of champagne, she felt the guilt of that silence weighing on her. The lights went out. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked as guests startled. Someone screamed. Emergency lights flickered on, dim, red, barely enough to see. "Everyone stay calm," Margot's voice rang out. "There's obviously been a technical issue. Security, get this fixed immediately." But security wasn't responding, because security was already packing up their equipment. A voice came over the sound system, calm, measured, familiar. "Good evening, everyone." Nina recognized it immediately, the man in the navy suit. "My name is Cyrus Ashford. Some of you may have heard of me. Most of you probably haven't, which is how I prefer it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nina saw Margot Sinclair's face go pale in the red emergency lighting. "About 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Margot Sinclair had me publicly searched and escorted out of this event. She accused me of being a thief, of not belonging here, of crashing a party I had no right to attend." A pause. "She was half right. I am a thief. I steal time from my sleep to run my companies. I steal moments from my schedule to review charitable donations. I steal opportunities from complacency to create jobs." Another pause. "But I didn't crash this party. I created it." The murmurs became gasps. "For the past 5 years, I have been the single largest donor to the Children's Hope Foundation. $50 million, anonymous, given because I believed in the mission of helping children escape the poverty I grew up in." Nina watched Margot clutching her husband's arm, her face now white as bone. "What I've discovered in the past 6 months is that approximately $20 million of my donations, and an unknown amount from other generous donors, has been systematically embezzled by the foundation's leadership, redirected from children's programs into private accounts, stolen from the kids who needed it most." The ballroom erupted. Cyrus's voice cut through. "The chaos. The venue you're standing in is owned by Ashford Holdings. As of 5 minutes ago, this event is terminated. The catering staff is packing up. The security team has been dismissed, and federal investigators are currently outside, waiting to speak with Mrs. Sinclair and her husband." Red and blue lights began flashing through the ballroom windows. "I want to be clear," Cyrus continued. "The Children's Hope Foundation's mission is real and important. The programs that actually exist will continue, under new leadership, with proper oversight, and with a new $25 million commitment from my foundation." His voice softened. "But the people who stole from children will face justice, starting tonight." The doors burst open. Federal agents streamed in, and Margot Sinclair, chairwoman of Manhattan's most prestigious charity gala, was led away in handcuffs, past the same guests she'd been laughing with 10 minutes ago. Here's what destroys me about this moment. Margot Sinclair looked at Cyrus Ashford and saw nothing, saw no one, saw a man in a simple suit who clearly didn't belong in her world. She had him searched like a criminal, laughed at him in front of 100 people, treated him like garbage, and the whole time he was the reason her charity existed, the reason she had a platform, the reason there was even an event for her to chair. She was so busy judging him by his clothes, his lack of flash, his refusal to perform wealth, that she missed who he actually was. How many of us do the same thing? How many people do we dismiss because they don't look the part? How many genuine donors, real contributors, actual difference makers do we overlook because they're not wearing the right watch or carrying the right bag? Subscribe if you've ever been underestimated because of how you looked. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody's paying attention to. The chaos lasted for 2 hours. Federal agents separated guests, taking statements. Lawyers arrived. Phones were confiscated. The most exclusive charity event in Manhattan became a crime scene. Through it all, Cyrus Ashford stood quietly in the lobby, watching the fallout of his carefully orchestrated exposure. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just exhaustion. $20 million stolen from children, 8 years of fraud, and it had taken a public humiliation to finally bring it to light. He should have moved faster, should have gone to the authorities sooner, should have been less patient. But patience was how he'd built everything, and patience was why he'd been able to construct tonight's trap so perfectly. "Mr. Ashford?" He turned. Nina Torres stood there, still in her catering uniform, her tray abandoned somewhere in the chaos. She looked nervous, unsure of herself. I just wanted to say, she hesitated. I'm sorry about what happened earlier, how they treated you. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have said something when she was accusing you. I just stood there. You were protecting your job, Cyrus said gently. I understand, believe me. Nina shook her head. It's not okay. You were the only person all night who treated me like a human being, and when they treated you like garbage, I stayed silent. Cyrus studied her for a moment. This young woman working multiple jobs to pay for nursing school, who'd shown him kindness when everyone else saw him as nothing. Nina, can I ask you something? Sure. Why nursing? She blinked at the unexpected question. My grandmother raised me. She got sick when I was 16. I watched nurses care for her in ways I couldn't. They gave her dignity at the end, comfort. I want to do that for other people. How much do you have left for school? 2 more years, about $80,000 with living expenses. She laughed bitterly. At the rate I'm going, I'll be 40 before I finish. Cyrus reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. This is my assistant's direct number. Call her Monday morning. The Ashford Foundation has a healthcare scholarship program, full tuition, living expenses, and a guaranteed job placement at one of our partner hospitals after graduation. Nina stared at the card. I can't accept that. Why not? Because you don't know me. I'm just a server who was nice to you for 30 seconds. You were kind when you had nothing to gain from it, Cyrus said. That's rare, and it's exactly the kind of person who should be a nurse. He pressed the card into her hand. Call Monday. If you don't, I'll have my assistant call you. Nina looked at the card, then at him, tears forming in her eyes. Why are you doing this? Because someone helped me once, when I was exactly where you are, working 3 jobs, dreaming of something better, invisible to everyone who could have made a difference. He smiled. Someone saw me, and it changed everything. I'm just paying it forward. Here's what Cyrus understood that Margot Sinclair never did. Charity isn't about galas. It isn't about $5,000 plates and designer gowns and being seen giving money. It's about seeing people, actually seeing them. The server working 3 jobs, the kid in the projects who just needs one chance, the invisible people who keep the world running while the powerful pretend they don't exist. Margot Sinclair threw a party every year and called it charity. She raised millions of dollars and skimmed 40% for herself. She looked at Cyrus Ashford, who'd given more than she'd ever stolen, and saw nothing worth respecting. But Cyrus looked at Nina Torres, a server making $12 an hour, and saw a future nurse, a future healer, someone worth investing in. That's the difference between performance and purpose. Subscribe if you believe that real charity isn't about who's watching, it's about who you're helping, and the person who serves you dinner might be the one most worthy of your investment. The investigation into the Children's Hope Foundation took 9 months. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Margot and Richard Sinclair had been embezzling since they'd taken over the charity's leadership 8 years ago. They'd started small, a few thousand here, some inflated expense reports there. But as the foundation grew, so did their theft. By the end, they'd stolen over $34 million. Not just from Cyrus's donations, from hundreds of donors who thought they were helping children, from corporate sponsors who'd attached their names to fraud, from the kids themselves who'd been promised programs that never materialized. The trial was a spectacle. Margot Sinclair, who'd spent decades as Manhattan's most beloved socialite, was led into court in handcuffs. The same people who'd laughed at Cyrus at the gala now testified against her, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. The defense tried everything, claimed the Sinclairs didn't know, blamed underlings, portrayed Margot as a victim of her husband's manipulation. The jury didn't buy it. Richard Sinclair received 15 years for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Margot Sinclair received 12. She was 67 years old. She would likely die in prison. Some people thought it was too harsh, that she was just a socialite who got in over her head, that she didn't deserve to spend her final years behind bars. Those people hadn't met the children, because while Margot was living in her Park Avenue penthouse, hundreds of kids were going without. After-school programs that existed on paper, but had no teachers. Scholarships that were promised, but never paid. Healthcare clinics that were supposed to open, but never did. $34 million, stolen from children. Cyrus didn't attend the sentencing. He'd said what he needed to say that night at the gala. Instead, he was in Brooklyn. At the grand opening of the Children's Hope Community Center, a $15 million facility built with Ashford Foundation funding, designed to provide exactly the services the Sinclairs had promised but never delivered. After-school programs, healthcare, tutoring, job training for parents, real help for real people. The center was named after Cyrus's grandmother, the woman who'd raised him in the projects, who'd believed in him when no one else did, who died before she could see what he became. The Estelle Ashford Community Center. Cyrus stood in the lobby, watching children stream through the doors for the first time. He thought about what Margot had said at the gala. People who actually contribute to this cause. She'd never understood what contribution actually meant. It wasn't about writing checks. It wasn't about gala appearances. It wasn't about seeing your name on a building. It was about this. Children running through halls that existed because someone cared enough to build them. Parents finding jobs through programs that actually worked. A community being lifted by resources that actually reached them. This was contribution, and Margot Sinclair would never understand that. 2 years after the gala that changed everything, Cyrus Ashford received a letter. It was handwritten. Careful penmanship on simple stationery. No return address, but postmarked from a federal women's correctional facility in Connecticut. He almost threw it away. Instead, he opened it. Mr. Ashford, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you burned it. But I need to write it anyway. I've spent 18 months in this place thinking about what I did. Not the legal crimes, though those were real and I deserve to be punished for them. But the other crime, the one nobody charged me with, the crime of looking at you and seeing nothing. I've replayed that night 1,000 times. The way I spoke to you, the way I had you searched, the way I laughed. I told myself I was protecting the event, protecting the guests. But that's not what I was doing. I was performing, showing everyone how powerful I was, how discerning, how superior. And I was so busy performing that I couldn't see the person standing in front of me. You weren't the only one. I did it my whole life. To servers, to drivers, to anyone I decided was beneath me. I looked at people and saw functions, not human beings. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to you, what I did to those children, what I did to everyone I ever dismissed. It was all the same crime. The crime of not seeing. I'm learning to see now. It's too late for most things, but maybe not for everything. Margot Sinclair Cyrus read the letter 3 times. He thought about throwing it away, about ignoring it, about letting Margot Sinclair rot in her cell without acknowledgement. But that's not who he was. 3 weeks later, he made a call, not to Margot, to the warden at the Connecticut facility. I'd like to fund a program, he said, financial literacy and job training for inmates preparing for release. I'll cover all costs. One condition. What's that? One of the first instructors needs to be Margot Sinclair. She has skills that could help people, if she's willing to use them. There was a long pause. That's unusual, Mr. Ashford. She hurt a lot of people, including me, but she wrote me a letter. She's starting to understand what she did, and I believe people can change, even people who don't deserve the chance. Why would you help her? Cyrus thought about his grandmother, about the foster homes, about every person who'd looked at a poor black kid from Brownsville and seen nothing, and about the few who'd seen something more. Because someone helped me once when I didn't deserve it, he said, and that's the only reason I'm here. So I pay it forward, even to the people who hurt me. 5 years later, the program Cyrus funded at the Connecticut facility became a model for correctional education nationwide. Margot Sinclair taught financial literacy for 3 years before her release. She was quiet, diligent, and, according to the warden, genuinely committed to helping other inmates prepare for life outside. When she got out at 72, she didn't return to Manhattan society. She moved to a small apartment in New Haven and continued volunteering with formerly incarcerated women. She never asked Cyrus for anything, never tried to contact him, never sought to repair her reputation. She just worked, quietly, invisibly, the way Cyrus had always worked. Nina Torres graduated from nursing school at the top of her class. She now runs the pediatric unit at the Estelle Ashford Community Health Center, the clinic attached to the community center Cyrus built in Brooklyn. She tells every patient who'll listen about the man who saw her when she was invisible, who gave her a chance when she had nothing to offer in return. He could have just shut down that gala and walked away, she says. He could have gotten his revenge and forgotten about everyone else. But he didn't. He saw me, and that changed everything. Cyrus Ashford is still invisible, still doesn't do interviews, still doesn't attend galas, still gives away hundreds of millions anonymously. But every year, on the anniversary of that night at the Crown Plaza, he does one thing. He puts on a simple navy suit, walks into the Estelle Ashford Community Center, and serves dinner to the kids in the after-school program. No cameras, no press, no recognition. Just a man who was once invisible, making sure other invisible people know they're seen. The end. Here's what Cyrus Ashford's story teaches us about power. Real power isn't about shutting down galas, or exposing frauds, or making people pay for their cruelty. Anyone with enough money can do that. Real power is what comes after. It's looking at the woman who humiliated you and seeing not an enemy, but a person capable of change. It's offering redemption to someone who doesn't deserve it, not because they've earned it, but because you refuse to let their cruelty define your character. It's serving dinner to kids in a community center, invisible and unrecognized, because that's who you want to be. Cyrus could have stayed angry, could have watched Margot rot without offering her a path forward, could have let revenge be the end of the story. But revenge wasn't the point. Justice was. And justice means believing that people can become better, even the people who hurt us most. Maybe someone has humiliated you, dismissed you, treated you like nothing. Subscribe if you believe that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming someone who lifts others up, including the ones who tried to tear you down. Because that's real power. The power to see people when no one else does, even the ones who once refused to see you. Bye.